Welcome, weary travelers, seasoned adventurers. I, your humble storyteller, shall regale you in a tale from our land of Arcadia. So light your pipes and fill your ales. Sit back and enjoy. Our story begins with a man standing upon a hill just beyond the city of Ostheim, the city of 1,000 echoes on the wind. Standing atop this hill, our hero peers down into the city in the splintered kingdom of Adelgis. Though a mere shadow of its former glory, the city prospered in ways of its own, surrounded by grand stone walls and squadrons of soldiers. This was the capital of the province of Windland. At the city gate, troves of merchants and travelers stormed beyond the walls in hopes of furthering their trade, or perhaps returning home from a long journey in far distant lands. Our hero found himself among the crowd, now entering the gates, hints of shining armor poking through his tattered cloak. Eyes and face concealed, he sought to draw little attention to himself here within these walls. To them, he was just another adventurer, passing through to his next opportunity. But that was not so true with our hero, was it? This hero hides a secret, one he aimed to keep hidden from the guards and the townspeople. A secret that provided the reason he wore this tattered cloak and kept his blade wrapped in cloth alongside his supplies. Every now and again, his piercing blue eyes revealed themselves to the light, shining nearly as bright as the armor he hid from the world. Stopping to talk to a merchant near the market square, the man peered over his wares. Minor trinkets and accessories abundant, the occasional rare gem sprinkled throughout caught his attention. "Looking for something specific, lad?" the old man running the stall asked. His hair was as white as the clouds, beard long enough to reach his belly. He had seen his fair share of winters, but his liveliness rivaled that of a man half his age. With a grand smile and a pipe poking out of his chapped lips, he greeted our hero. "Just looking," he said softly, with a smile that was almost unseen by the old man. As he looked over the wares, a powerful wind blew throughout the city, fluttering his cloak and forcibly lowering his hood down. This wind bore with it the power of a storm, yet as swift as lightning, and ceased just as quickly. None of the merchants seemed to be bothered, but the young face revealed from our hero's hood caught some attention. His hair was golden blonde like a lion's mane, pulled back behind his ears. Sparkling blue eyes like diamonds defined his sharp face in an ocean of pale skin. But a small scar could be seen across his left eye from an old, almost forgotten battle. While most did not recognize him, a few of the merchants began to murmur before he pulled the hood of his cloak back up to cover his head. "I'll take the small stones here," he said softly, pointing to a few different stones on the merchant's table. As the merchant gathered them up, he placed them in a small bag before they were exchanged for coin. "Say, you're that knight fellow, aren't you? The pretty one with the white armor, yeah?" The old man retrieved his pipe from his mouth, stammering his words a bit. "What's his name again? Something with an A? Argus? No. Edith? No, that's not it either." Thinking for a moment as the young warrior places the bag in his pack, the old man leaped up with enthusiasm and vigor. "Arden! Yes, that's his name. Arden." The blonde-haired wanderer merely smiled in response. "Don't worry, I'll keep your secret, young fella. Just stay out of trouble now." "Thank you, kind sir. Have a pleasant day." "You as well, lad." Leaving the merchant square, our young hero found himself in a rather large crowd of people gathering near the castle, known as Sky Keep. Hundreds of citizens, all of different flocks of life, seemed to be gathered here for some sort of announcement. Guards at the ready with spears and pikes guarded the entrance to the fortress. At the top of the balcony, one of the city nobles, Faust, addressed the city. "I shall speak plainly," he said, with a voice of conviction and authority. "I am aware of the dragon sightings. While they remain as rumors, and rumors are all they will remain, I and the city guard assure you we have taken every precaution to protect this city in the event that these sightings hold bearing. You need not worry, my dear citizens. Resume your daily duties." His confidence was clear. Adelgis once stood as the beacon of humanity against the destruction of dragons and other creatures, but Adelgis no longer held such power. Our hero knew this. While he did not know if these dragon sightings were true or not, He did know that the implications of such a sighting proved worrisome. Mankind was no longer prepared for dragons, who were thought to have been long since driven to extinction. The great dragon wars, Wormkrieg, were long behind us. Or were they? The people of Astheim returned to their daily activities, but there was an overwhelming sense of dread that lurked in their hearts. The young hero could feel it, even without looking at any of their faces. Dragons were thought to have long since been extinct, but even he knew the rumors were growing. The young warrior wandered through Astheim, among its stone pillars and monolithic towers. Even now, it was as impressive as any city of men. Finding an inn to stay at was no troublesome task at all. Here, at the Sleeping Dryad, he found a simple enough place to stay. The bar crowded with people drinking and singing songs. The barkeep greeted our hero happily. "What can I do you for?" he asked. "Just a room for the night shall do. Thank you." Placing a couple of silver pieces down onto the table, he felt rumbling in the distance. None of those in the tavern seemed to notice, but he did. A few moments after it ceased, he wondered, what was that rumbling? Something in his heart told him to be wary, but after a long day of traveling, he was beyond exhausted. "Actually, I'll have a drink before I go to bed." Grabbing a pint of ale and looking around, he saw a group of men drinking and talking. While it wasn't like him to socialize with the locals, his curiosity got the better of him. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. They were playing a game of cards. "Of course, lad. Grab a hand. I hope you've got coin to spare. Felwyn here is on a hot streak and he's taking all of ours." The hero joined their games and drank his ale. They were simple folk who talked and joked, but they were nice people. They didn't question his identity or why he was wearing a cloak. But the conversation inevitably shifted to the elephant or dragon in the room. The group went silent. "I think it's a load of horse crap. Don't doubt the power of dragons, mate. They've ruled for thousands of years." "But they died out," one of the men shouted. "Did you see them die?" "Well, did you?" The other man went quiet. "What do you think, lad?" They all looked to him. He was silent for a moment, but then he answered. "I think it's certainly possible that they're still around, but no need to worry just yet. I wager your leaders have it handled if they truly have returned, and even so, they were beaten once." The table had mixed reviews on this response, but the warrior had stayed awake for far longer than he intended. It was time to rest. "Thank you, gents. I'll be off to bed." He finished his drink and headed upstairs to the small room with one tiny, barely comfortable bed to sleep on. But it was a bed to sleep on. Throughout the night, he dreamed of the western shores. Water clear enough to see your feet and sand beneath his toes. It was a wonderful dream of a faraway place from his childhood. Looking off to the rocks, waves crashing against them. He saw a beautiful elven woman, hair white as clouds, soft as silk. She smiled at him as the sun began to set on the sea. The sky, beautiful orange and purple colors abound. It was a sight to behold, almost as if he had died and returned to the land of his ancestors. But he was rudely awoken. There was smoke in the air. It pierced his nostrils and burned his throat. The smoke was coming from just outside the window of his room, and as he peered outside, he saw the crimson flames reaching the sky, burning a nearby building. The inn began to shake and rumble. He could hear it in the distance. A dragon's roar. A large section of the town had been set ablaze. The beating of wings could be heard from half the town away. Quickly putting on his shoes and grabbing his sword, he made the decision to leave the inn. Opening the window, he used his cloak to cover his face. Coughing and gasping for air, he crawled out onto the roof. Wrapped blade in hand, he slid across the shingles, catching himself before nearly falling. High above Astheim, he saw the beast. It was larger than any creature he had ever seen. Its wingspan cast a shadow over the flames it spewed down below. Its scales were dark as the night, and its yellow eyes pierced his soul. Was this fear he felt? His heart was racing. Beginning to unwrap his sword, A shining steel blade, coated in magnificent silver, was revealed. It was bright enough to catch the dragon's eye. While the city guard fired arrows after arrows on it, the creature's scales were barely scratched. They needed far more firepower. Catapults launched massive stone blocks at the beast, but it was far more maneuverable than they could counter. Twirling through the air, its wings sent a wind that shook the entire town. People were knocked to their feet. Screams echoed throughout the night as people rushed to the town garrison. The dragon, faced with the choice of confronting our hero or attacking the garrison, chose to go where he could deal the most damage. People flooded by the hundreds into the stone fortress. Ballistas fired massive arrows in an attempt to pierce the dragon's flesh. One managed to remove several scales as black blood splattered across the roof of a nearby house. The dragon merely grew angry, smashing the ballista with its claws large enough to cleave a horse in two. Our hero felt in his heart that he would have to intervene. He had left his sparkling silver armor in the room at the inn. There was no time to grab it now. Armed with only his sword, he felt adrenaline rushing through his veins. He had to move. Leaping from roof to roof, he was a few hundred meters from the garrison. The beast wreaked havoc on the fortress, spewing molten hot flames onto the stone, tearing ballistas and catapults apart. It suffered few injuries in this destructive endeavor. Wrapping around the fortress with its large reptile-like body, the spiked tail it possessed embedded into the stone, it was crushing the building like a serpent wrapped around its prey. Spotting our hero, the beast began to laugh. Cackling and laughing, it peered with its yellow eyes at him. "Hello, Auden. Pale night. Small candle in the night." The hero froze in his tracks. The dragon knew his name. He felt the beast pierce his mind as he was flooded with dark thoughts. What sorcery was this? In all his years, he had never felt such an overwhelming darkness. Standing his ground, he slammed his sword onto the roof of the building in which he stood, light emanating from his blade. This was a paladin's power. That's what he was, a warrior of the light. His name was Auden, and he did not intend to stand down no matter what trickery this dragon thrust upon him. Brighter than a candle, perhaps. Maybe a torch in the infinite darkness around you. Your powers are no match for me. I see into your heart, Paladin. I smell your fears and your nightmares. They are my domain. You cannot escape the shadow. His voice was deep and filled with avarice like a demon, grumbling and exhaling steam hot enough to melt the skin off a man. Auden did not tremble. No matter how much fear he felt in the pit of his stomach, he was a trained paladin, one who fought dark sorcerers and warriors across this land. No beast would frighten him into submission, least of all one who claimed the shadows. "Remove yourself from the garrison, beast, lest I remove you by force." "Is that a threat, Paladin?" He began to cackle, his bellowing laughter echoing throughout Asheim, piercing the ears of anyone within the city walls. Even Auden was forced to cover his ears. Steam and hot breath began to heat up the buildings around the fortress. His dark belly began to glow fiery orange. The paladin sensed an attack was coming his way. Leaping from one roof to another, dragon fire engulfed the entire row of houses and shops near his former perch. The force of the flames shattered stone, and the intensity of the heat reduced them to cinders. Dragonfire was even hotter than his wildest dreams. "Is that your best, fell beast? I suggest you remove yourself from the garrison if you aim to hit me with such flames." While taunting, the beast did not seem wise. It was imperative the dragon left that garrison. Thousands of lives depended on it. "I see your game, foolish man, but I'll bite." He chuckled as he slithered off the fortress. It leaped onto the ground below. Every building in a kilometer radius shook and trembled. The true battle was about to begin. Auden got a running start across the building as he dodged the next attack. This dragon swept its large claws across the town, shattering stone and splintering wood. Projecting light from his hands, the paladin blocked some of the incoming debris. While he was no mage, he did possess strong magical powers, albeit limited in selection. Lifting his sword into the air, the silver blade filled with light. Slashing through the wind, a titanic wave of energy struck the side of the dragon, shattering dozens of its scales, dark blood splattering across the stone streets. The beast growled in pain. He had never been dealt such a blow by any mortal. While it was not near fatal, it did injure his left side severely. Screeching loud enough to shake all of Ostheim, he took to the sky. "You may command the light. From the skies you have no power. I will rain hell onto this city, and you can only stand and watch, warrior of the light." Admittedly, range was not Auden's specialty, but that did not mean he was powerless. There was one attack in his arsenal that could provide the power he needed, but that relied on him surviving the incoming flames. The dragon stayed true to his word and breathed hellfire down onto the city, burning buildings by the dozens. The city was filled with flame and ruin. The entire merchant district was left to cinders and ashes. Smoke reached the sky high enough to be seen from Sturmland, but the smoke worked to Auden's advantage. He was shielded by it. The dragon had now lost track of the hero. Where did he go? Ballistas and catapults, the few that remained, fired upon the dragon, being struck in the head by a very large rock. He nearly fell to the ground, growling. He looked at the townspeople and guards who were trying to help the paladin. Fortunately, they had given him the time he needed. Making his way to one of the large bell towers in the city, it was nearly destroyed. The bell melted and stairs splintered. He was forced to climb the shattered rocks to the top. Slipping down several meters, Auden almost fell to his death. Holding on one stone slab with all of his might, he knew his own death would seal the fate of those in the city. He had to live. Climbing to the top of the bell tower, he was panting. His body was covered in bruises and several burns. Sweating buckets and wishing for enough water to fill a lake, he had to put aside his own needs for his attack. Raising a hand to the sky, he called upon the power of the gods of old, those of light and justice. His hand began to glow as it was bestowed righteous power. Firing a gargantuan sphere of light at the dragon, it struck him with the might of the sun. His scales were broken, and one of his wings was severely damaged. He hit the ground like a falling star, shaking the city. This was a fatal wound, blood spilling onto the streets from the beast like a river. The sheer impact snuffed out most of the flames, leaving a massive crater in its wake. Auden fell to his rear, breathing slowly. He had used up most of his energy in that magical attack. If not for the intervention of the gods, he most likely would have perished. The city fell silent in the night. The air was hot from the flames that still raged on the outskirts of town. Our hero finally could breathe. And then, the rumbling began. The dragon stood up, limping and bloodied, but not yet dead. "Where are you, pale knight? I smell you. I hear your heart flutter. Did you think I was dead?" Attempting to exhale flames, only smoke exited the dragon's maw. Coughing and growling, it began to slash and thrash at every building it could get its claws on, looking for Auden. Leveling building after building, it trampled across the city. Was Ostheim doomed? Could this beast be truly beaten? Limping slightly, Auden struggled to stand. He had been knocked back against a wall and fell from the bell tower onto a nearby roof. Blood dripped from his forehead and shrouded his left eye. He could barely see, but he did not retreat. Walking towards the dragon, it reared its spiked head to face him. He could not fly or breathe fire, but his claws were still sharp. My claws are blades that can pierce stone. My teeth will pierce you like pikes. Snarling and charging towards the paladin, our hero stood tall. Lifting his sword into the air, he let out a loud battle cry. The people of the town shouted at the top of their lungs. They were shouting his name. Auden! Auden! They shouted. Their words gave him strength he never thought was possible. Thrusting his sword forward, he sent a blinding light bright enough to turn night into day, if just for a mere moment. The dragon fell, and Auden stood tall. Its body began to turn to dust and ash, scattering in the powerful winds. Echoes of victory cries filled the city. The paladin stumbled, stabbing his blade into the ground to hold himself upright. He was battered and bleeding, but as the night ended and the sun began to rise, he still stood. As pain overcame his entire body and fatigue set in, he still stood. Auden, the Pale Knight, did not fall that day, and Ostheim still stands. The people will remember him until the end of days, their hero of light. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. This is our first in the Tales of Arcadia. Ideally, I'll be making more episodes of this, hopefully longer ones, maybe a couple of different random stories here and there. If you have any feedback, please do let me know. I know it is a little rough, but was a good test story for sure. I'll try and do them about weekly or so. Maybe I'll do a couple in a week, just depends if I do longer or shorter ones. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment, subscribe, you know what to do. Thanks again.